fantasy, caught in a landslide, no escape from reality.
Hey guys, what's going on? Underground Geek here. So if you're watching this video, you can kind of tell what I'm going to be talking about. If you know who Judas is, you know that he was one of the 12 disciples. And you may be wondering, why in the world would you make a comic book based on this? Now, this could go one of two ways. I do feel like there's not enough of ways to put Christianity into pop culture. You know, it's not really supposed to be part of that because it's not of the world, but I do feel like if people could try a little bit harder, you could make these Bible stories into interesting comic books because they're actually such interesting stories. I mean, a guy killed 1,000 people with a donkey jawbone. You don't think that could be an interesting comic book? But so then this book comes out, and I had a heads up from Dark Philly that it was coming out. And she knows that I'm super religious. So she threw this at me, and I read the synopsis for it, and I was like, ooh, this can go one of two ways. Either this could be a really good way of getting the story out to people that are not aware of, you know, the inner workings of it, or this could be a cringe fest of an angsty man-child that is upset about his religious family. So you just read this with me, and you just make the connections of which you think that is. Take a big swig of my Monster Energy Ultra Sunrise, and then let's get into this. The cover is actually pretty cool. Aside from that jolting Boom Studios Judas square in the center of the comic book, if you got the virgin cover of this could be pretty cool. I like the foil effect of the gold thorn vines growing through there. It almost looks like the guy that does Hellboy. So then as we get into this, let's look at who made this book. And it immediately jumped out at me, look at the people that worked on this book. All their names except for one starts with a J, and the name of the book is Judas with a J. And I was instantly like, oh my god, Illuminati confirmed, guys. But it was just funny. I was like, what are the chances of all those guys with a J name, except for poor old Colin Bale, being the same on a book with J on it? You know, it's because of the font that it jumped out at me. Now let's get into this. The writer is Jeff Loveness. This is who's done this, and the cover is Jacob Rebelka, and he also did the illustration. He's very good. I would like to see other stuff that he's worked on, because I'm not really a fan of that style, of Hellboy style, but this is actually pretty interesting because the coloring is so good. Alright, so let's get into this. Right off the bat, we have a Bible quote here. It says, Matthew 26 verse 24 says, "But woe to he who betrays the Son of Man. It would be better if he had not ever been born." And that's true. That is in there. So, all right. So moving on, we get to the first page here, and we instantly know what's happening. We have the first picture there where Judas is taking the money from the people for, oh my God, somebody just went flying through this parking lot. But anyway, Judas takes the money to give up Jesus, and it says, "Did you know it would be me?" And then we have him whispering to Jesus, says, "From the beginning, did you know all of it?" And then Jesus is sitting there, and he is carrying the cross. So we're already kind of knowing what's going on here. So we go to the next page, and they obviously traced this guy because he looks so familiar. This Judas character, he looks so much like an actor that I've seen in a movie. I can't place who it is. But anyway, you see Judas hanging himself. He says, Was that why you chose me? Was that the only reason you chose me? I tried so hard to believe to be good, but you knew from the beginning I never had a chance. Well, that's not true. So then, what happens when you hang yourself? Well, that's suicide. Guess where you're going. So he is traveling down to hell, and he says then he hears a voice. He says the voice comes and it whispers truth. And the voice says, yes, this was always the end. And the dialogue box for the other voice is black. So instantly you know who it's probably going to be that's talking. So then we get an open shot here of hell. And I have to say, this is a very interesting way to draw hell. This is pretty cool. I mean, it's obviously not because it's hell, but I mean, it's almost like a Constantine feel to it, but it's more gloomy colors and like fiery colors. So I don't know, it's pretty interesting. Now, the one thing that I don't like is they draw Judas with the grace of God around his head, and you know he wouldn't have the grace of God because you're in hell. But anyway, so then he's talking more about his backstory here. He talks about he lost his mother. She died, and then he grew very sad because of that. And I was like, okay. Lots of people have lost loved ones. But then it shows his life and how he had to steal to eat, and with all the things that happened in his life. And then he said one day he heard another voice, and that voice was Jesus, and he said, come, follow me. And I find it very interesting that he uses the red font for Jesus's speech, just like you would in the Bible. And it's those little hints like that he tries to make the correlation with the Bible that almost makes you think there's truth to what he's saying. So then he says, I can't explain it. I've tried and I still can't. I never will. But you spoke. And life could only be this after this. Once you said this, I was with you. So then we get more shots of hell. And he's saying things like, and now you've sent me here. Like everyone else in the story you were finished with. And I was like, no, you gave up your own Messiah and then hung yourself. It's kind of like you did that to yourself. And so then we get the sight of the demons in hell. And at first I was like, I was kind of upset because he's using a verse in the Bible to describe the archangels. They're not really the archangels, but the seraphim angels. And I was thinking, no, those are demons. Those are not seraphim angels. But, if you know your Bible, you know that the devil's army is 1/3 of the angels of heaven. And when they were sent down to hell, they basically were burned up and disfigured and things like that. So it would kind of make sense that they were changed into a grotesque manner, but still had the slight appearance of an angel, because he's talking about all the different wings and the faces and things like that. And that's what I said before. It's those little hints of truth that he puts in there. And then he's trying to remember a song that his mom used to sing to him from the Bible, and it's actually the prayer. It says, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. And then he makes a very angsty claim, but you aren't with me, not anymore. I never mattered to you. And so then we cut back to Jesus talking with the people, and then we get the first sign of what happened to Judas. There's this voice that starts to get into his mind, and obviously that would be the devil. It's been in the Bible several times. The devil cannot. God and Jesus can talk to you in your head. They can see what you're thinking. You can't hold anything back from God or Jesus, but you can hold back from the devil. The devil cannot see your thoughts, but he can try to influence your thoughts from an outward perspective, if that makes sense. So basically that's what he's trying to do here. The voice is trying to talk to him, and then we get to see some of God or some of Jesus' miracles here, and basically he's saying, if you could heal these people and if you could feed these people, why aren't you healing and feeding everyone? And I was like, well, okay, I could understand that if you were just like, why don't you just help everyone? But of course, that's not what Jesus was there for. He was there to die for you. That was the whole point of Jesus being there. He was there so that he could live and die, because he was the last sacrifice. And after the last sacrifice, that's why we go from the Old Testament to the New Testament, and then there's no more sacrifice, because he is like, because they used to sacrifice back then. You sacrifice animals, all different kinds of things, and then once Jesus done that, that's why we don't do that anymore, because it was complete then. There's no more sacrifice. He literally saved your soul by dying. And so then we see more things that he's doing, and then we get to one of the important parts here, which is where Jesus has his feet washed. And so the way, what's so funny about this is he makes it sound like Judas was always the one questioning him. And it wasn't that way. A lot of them question him because they're humans, and they're naturally questionable about things they don't understand. But the lady's washing his feet here, and if you know from the verse, she actually cried when she saw him, and used her tears to wash his feet, and perfume that she had with her to wash them, and then clean them with her hair. And Judas says, could that not have been sold and given to the poor, that expensive perfume that she had? And this is where he cherry picks what Jesus said and says, the poor you will always have with you, but you will not always have me. And then he makes it that point to where Judas decides to turn on him. So then Judas goes to the people, finds out how much they'll take for him, and then that he again cherry picks and puts words into Jesus' mouth and says, Jesus sees Judas there at that night when they've come to get him. He says, what you're about to do quickly. And he never said that. And then he says, you looked at me and you knew. You always knew. Life could only be this. So then, as Jesus has been taken away, the voice starts really messing with him again. And at that point, he ends his life, and we're back to him being in hell again. So then at that point, he's basically wandering around. I don't know if you've read Dante's Inferno, but basically he's walking around in hell, kind of like in that situation. And then that's when some of the people that are in hell start to attack him. And one of them says, it's you. You are the betrayer. I did nothing to deserve this, but you. And then we cut to the rest of them, and it says, all of hell was made for you. And that could be one of those situations, because naturally they're going to say that I shouldn't be here. Just like when you're in prison, they're going to say I'm innocent, but you should be here. So then they hurt him, and then once again he cherry picks a verse here. He says, he was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. If you go on to read the rest of that, they're actually talking about Jesus. So then he says, I prayed, even though I was in hell and being attacked by these demons and people, I prayed. And then at that point he says, when I prayed, I was actually heard, and the wicked flee. And he says, and then I hear it, I raise my eyes, and there he is. And he says, come, follow me. Just like what God said, or just like what Jesus said. He says, I am saved by his voice. And then it's to be continued. And obviously that's Satan. And it's a pretty good little drawing of Satan. I mean, whoever this artist is very good. I have a different interpretation for one of my stories I'm writing for that, but I think that's a pretty cool little deal there. But here's the thing. So now that you've read this book, let me talk about a couple of things. First of all, it's probably not a good idea to cherry pick verses in the Bible and then interpret it in your own way. That's how you get in trouble. So let's talk about a couple things here. When he's talking about when Jesus was having his feet washed, what Jesus actually says is, he says, they say, you know, why waste? We could sell this stuff. And then Jesus says, well, why do you trouble this woman? She has done a beautiful thing to me. For you always have the poor with you, but you will not always have me. So see, that's where he got that from. In pouring this ointment on my body, she has done it to prepare me for burial. Because of course he knew he was going to die, and he'd already told them that. And he says, truly I say to you, whoever this gospel is proclaimed in the world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her. So basically, she was preparing him to die. Back then it was customary to clean the people, wrap them up for death. And he knew he was going to die, and he already told them he was going to sacrifice himself. That was the whole point of going back to Jerusalem, was to die. And so I don't really like how they cherry picked that. And here's another thing that I want to talk about. Speaking of the disciples and Judas, with what he tries to portray Judas as, and I know this is fiction, but if you know what he was talking about in some of his interviews, this is the reason I'm going over this. Jesus had told the disciples, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it. But whoever loses their life for me will find it. He was supposed to sacrifice all selfish ways. And obviously he wasn't doing that in this book. So, you know, you just really shouldn't cherry pick this kind of stuff. But let's talk about something for a minute, because the thing is, in some of his interviews for writing this book, they asked him about it. He said, quote unquote, I used to read the Bible cover to cover, and I grew up in a super religious family. Now, when someone says they grew up in a super religious family, that's code word for I'm angsty, I hate my mom and dad, and I don't like Christianity anymore. That's pretty much what that's code for. The thing is, you can have super religious weird families. You can have people that like to use the word of God to punish their children in an unfair way. There's lots of people that do that. But me, I have a personal experience with someone who used the same phrases that he's using here. And that person grew up in a Church of Christ family, which also read the Bible cover to cover all the time. They go to church. They don't listen to any music, because they view music of the devil, since the devil was the light bringer and played music. And the thing is, they were quote unquote super religious. And a lot of them are quite strange. I'll just go ahead and tell you that right now. But here's the thing. This book has an extremely important meaning to it. And the reason I say that is, this book is made to question the Bible. That was the whole point of this book. He wrote this in order to put that question in your mind of, are the things, the way they played out in the Bible, are they the right way that they played out in the Bible? Or is there a different perspective to be had here? Now, it's not to say that this isn't an interesting story, but the thing is here, he has made Judas out to be a selfish villain, a selfish person. That's what he's, I don't know if it's what he intentionally wanted to do, because in one of the credits it says, every story needs a villain, quote unquote Judas, reading coming out so-and-so. But when you try to make Jesus seem like the selfish one here, I have a little bit of a problem with that, because Jesus was the last lamb to be sacrificed. He knew he was going to die. He actually went on the mountain to ask God to please find another way to do this, because he didn't want to die. Because at that point he was in human form and had human feelings, emotions, and all that kind of stuff, but he was still Jesus at the same time. And I don't know. It's just, I knew that it was probably going to be like this when I read it, but I just want people to know what's going on in this, because there's a lot of people out there that don't know what's in the Bible. I mean, and that's it's a problem, but it's not a problem. But the thing is, I don't want people to read this and assume it's correct. And you're saying, well, you're just assuming people are stupid. Well, people believe what they read, and they subconsciously store it back there in their knowledge, and then they pull it later on. I've seen stuff on TV that was completely wrong, and then later on when I'm talking about stuff, I would repeat that, and they'd be like, whoa, that's not anything like what that was. And I was like, you're right. You know, I mean, I just want people to know, to be able to know all perspectives of what's going on, and to be able to actually go in there and say, well, I know that's not correct. You know what I mean? I want you to be able to read this in the way it was intended. Boom Studios categorized this under drama fantasy. And you know what fantasy is? Not real. So that's pretty much all I got to say. I do feel like that this guy right here doesn't quite understand the Bible as much as he thinks he does, or he may understand it very well and be like the person that I talked about before that was very knowledgeable about the Bible, could quote you verses all day long at the same time that he was injecting crack into his arm. I'm not talking about the writer, I'm talking about the person that I know. So just because you know the Bible doesn't mean you know the Bible. I can read a science book all day long and not actually know it. So that's all I wanted to say. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. I hope I didn't make too many people mad, but you're going to make people mad because we're not of this world, and the world will hate us for it. But other than that, that's all I got to say. Talk to you guys later. Underground Geek out.